Forget for a moment your usual perceptions of comets. These are not just cosmic dust, but two objects that are not ordinary rocks, but grand structures racing towards the sun. On its own, this event is not surprising, but here is what truly astonishes. They are moving from completely opposite points in our galaxy. One from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, the other from Aquarius. Their paths intersect at the same point and at the same time. The probability of such an event, if considered random, is zero. Anyone with even a basic understanding of statistics will confirm that this is absurd. This is not a random coincidence, but a carefully calculated maneuver. The first object, named Atlas, is already an anomaly in itself. It is pure nickel, containing no iron. Such materials do not exist in nature. Its inner core generates 10 gigawatts of energy. For comparison, this is 50 times more than the energy released during the Chernobyl disaster. The tail of this object is not just evaporating gas, but a targeted carbon emission. Velyab called it modulation of the thrust mixture, a beautiful way to say that this apparatus has an engine. This is obvious. But then a second object appears, C2025R2S, or SWAN. And this is where things get really serious. It is 100 times larger, brighter, and was discovered not by a ground-based telescope, but by a probe located in deep space. A plasma shield has formed around it, an active electromagnetic screen that repels solar wind. We are observing how it does this. Its tail pulses with green light, and this is not just for aesthetics. It indicates the operation of a course correction system, making the smallest and most precise adjustments to its trajectory. This is simply incredible. Now, about the energy. If Atlas, with its 10 gigawatts, seemed extraordinary, SWAN accumulates 10,000 gigawatts every second. Such a level of energy can only be observed during black hole collisions, and here it is contained within a controlled and stable object. The question we must ask is, what technology is capable of creating and controlling such energy density? And here is the finale of this impeccable choreography. In October of 2025, both objects will approach the Sun to within 50 million kilometers. Then they will do something that definitively goes beyond coincidence. They will simultaneously disappear behind the disk of the Sun. For us, for all our telescopes, they will simply vanish. These will be perfectly synchronized solar eclipses, orchestrated by two objects coming from opposite ends of the galaxy. So what do we have? Two artificial objects with engines, energy sources that surpass everything we can imagine, and protective fields. They are executing precisely coordinated maneuvers, the endpoint of which is our Sun. This is no longer a question of astronomy, but a question of fundamental physics, and perhaps the most important question in the history of humanity. We are witnessing an abnormal phenomenon. We see intention. At this stage of events, astronomical science is torn between the desire to maintain a cautious language and careful phrasing, and the necessity to acknowledge the obvious and growing confusion. We are not observing comets, but rather something that, by all indications, can be called machines. This hypothesis is no longer something marginal or secondary. It is finding increasing confirmation in reports of spectroscopic analysis and complex orbital models. Changes in the color of the tails, recorded in real time, also speak volumes. If the objects related to Atlas truly do not share a common origin, how can they so synchronously approach the Sun? What invisible and unfathomable logic governs this astonishing cosmic coincidence? Is this merely an incredibly unlikely coincidence? Or are we witnessing the first evidence in human history of a coordinated network of interstellar visitors? What if the real mystery lies not in each individual object, but in the system that invisibly connects them? When reliable and repeatedly verified data calls established scientific categories into question, science faces a difficult choice. Either adjust the existing model of the world or completely rethink the phenomenon itself. The situation with objects R2 and Atlas creates precisely this unprecedented pressure on the scientific community. The report and spectrograms, which have already become the subject of heated discussions at closed scientific conferences, leave virtually no room for doubt. They contain no sublimating ice and no typical cosmic dust associated with comets. There are no chemical signs that would classify these bodies as comets. Instead, the instruments detect the presence of nickel with impurities that resemble industrial materials, as well as a constant emission of carbon dioxide, which is released in directed streams. This is no longer just an isolated case. It represents a radical break in our understanding of what is considered natural and ordinary in space. A specific example from recent history will help to clearly demonstrate the seriousness and unusualness of this phenomenon. In the year 2019, when the second interstellar object in history, named 2 and Borisov, was confirmed, it crossed the solar system, displaying all the expected and predictable signs. The formation of a tail, actively changing under the influence of the sun, as well as a trajectory that fully complied with the laws of physics for free bodies. It behaved like a classic comet, except that it arrived from interstellar space. This case reinforced the scientific community's belief that Oumuamua, the first such object discovered in the year 2017, was merely a strange exception. However, the emergence of Atlas and Object R2 completely refutes this comforting version. If two objects consecutively exhibit behavior that can be characterized as technological, then this exception ceases to be such and begins to claim the role of a new standard. This is the very scientific shock that apparently many official organizations strive to avoid. In rare comments, they mention the existence of anomalies, but do not delve into details. The European Space Agency prefers not to publish reports that go beyond dry technical data, keeping any interpretations under strict secrecy. This organized silence creates a peculiar social effect. On one hand, independent scientific communities, unburdened by obligations to governmental structures, openly and actively discuss the obtained data on specialized forums and in preprints of scientific articles. On the other hand, leading global media almost completely ignore this topic. In this information vacuum, a space for various speculations grows, sometimes blatantly absurd and at times surprisingly insightful and justified. However, the problem extends beyond purely academic science. The immediate impact of this event is primarily cultural. Modern societies are conditioned from childhood to believe in stable and consistent categories: planet, star, comet, asteroid. When one of these fundamental categories begins to crumble before our eyes, the entire system of predictability and order in the world starts to shake to its very foundations. The reaction of society can be observed on social networks, where astronomical forums demonstrate record attendance following the announcement of the discovery of Object SWAN R2. Notably, most discussions do not focus so much on the beauty or unusualness of this phenomenon, but rather on its possible intentionality. A simple logical chain forms in the collective consciousness. If something so complex and technological crosses our sky, then someone deliberately sent that something. This collective perception, even if it has not yet received official recognition, holds immense significance. It subconsciously influences how we perceive our future, how we see our true place in the cosmos, and even how we begin to rethink ancient monuments of our past. Another aspect that is rarely discussed publicly is the strategic impact. If, even as a thought experiment, we accept the hypothesis that Atlas and the SWAN are technological artifacts, practical questions arise. What planetary defense system do we have against interstellar machines of such a level? The DART program, which in the year 2022 managed to slightly alter the trajectory of a small asteroid, would be completely ineffective against an object protected by an active plasma shield and possessing a core energy exceeding 10,000 gigawatts. The very comparison seems almost grotesque. It is akin to trying to stop a modern aircraft carrier by throwing ordinary stones at it. Finally, it is worth mentioning the energy dimension of this problem. Human science is making every effort to create stable and controlled nuclear fusion in laboratory conditions. Projects with budgets measured in trillions of dollars, such as the international project ITER, are still in the experimental stage. However, if the information we have is correct, aboard the object known as SWAN R2, there functions a compact and controlled star-scale plasma reactor. This is not just science fiction for our society, but a stark reminder of how fragile and vulnerable our energy system is. We are completely dependent on fossil fuels and unstable, fluctuating networks. While above our heads exists something demonstrating engineering solutions capable of changing our understanding of energy, climate, and transportation in just a few decades. Here, reflections inevitably shift into the ethical realm. Are we, as a civilization, ready to acknowledge that we are not the most advanced civilization in the universe? That we are merely one among many, and far from the most advanced? If we can accept this, a sharp shift in public and scientific attention will occur immediately. Science and politics will no longer be able to afford fragmented paths. They will have to unite around common goals, the survival of humanity, and understanding what lies beyond our perception. Yet, instead of fostering global cooperation and open dialogue, we observe official silence and hidden competition among various space agencies. In this context, staying informed becomes not just a matter of curiosity, but a matter of cultural survival. It is important to follow new analytical publications, paying attention to objective sources of information, without excessive sensationalism. After all, this is not just about space, but about our vision for the future of humanity. Nevertheless, none of the above leads us to the most alarming and unpleasant detail of this entire story. Until now, we have discussed trajectories, chemical compositions, and energy cores. But within the data about these objects lies one important detail that has the potential to radically change our worldview. The object known as SWAN R2 is not a random visitor. It returns. Its visits occur every 22,540 years, every time in October, and each time it passes in close proximity to the Sun. We are dealing not with a singular miraculous coincidence, but with a true calendar. The confirmation that the object known as SWAN R2 follows a strict cycle lasting over 22,000 years compels us to transcend conventional thinking and confront dilemmas concerning philosophy, anthropology, and the very essence of human identity. We are accustomed to perceiving space as an endless, static, lifeless expanse, where planets and stars follow their predictable paths, completely indifferent to our brief and fleeting existence. But what do we do when interstellar bodies behave as if they are following a predetermined program? And even more concerning, when this program is significantly older than all civilizations that have ever existed on Earth. Here arises the most unpleasant and complex philosophical issue. What if we are not just observers in the universe, but we ourselves are objects of observation? This unexpected turn of events fundamentally shifts the focus of the entire discussion. For centuries, we have sincerely believed that science, by accumulating knowledge, could illuminate the cosmic darkness and unravel its mysteries. However, the cyclical nature of the SWAN suggests otherwise. Perhaps we are merely beginning to enact a script written long before Homo sapiens learned to speak. The gaps in our scientific understanding become glaringly obvious. We lack models capable of explaining how a complex machine can maintain the operation of a reactor with a power output of 10,000 gigawatts for millennia, enduring zones of extreme radiation and changing gravity without any signs of wear or degradation. We do not have satisfactory answers to questions about the behavior of its tails, which astonishingly mimic the function of controlled exhaust. We do not even have confidence that we are correctly interpreting what pure nickel means in the context of extraterrestrial engineering. We are limited in our ability to interpret data because we are using tools that may be too primitive to reflect the true nature of what stands before us. This creates a yawning chasm between our knowledge and what we observe. The history of humanity has repeatedly shown that societies collapse when confronted with a reality they cannot comprehend or accept. This was the case with isolated peoples who first saw European ships and found themselves unable to even imagine the power bearing down upon them. There is a real threat that we are repeating the same mistake, but on a cosmic scale. We continue to regard the SWAN and the ADLOS as anomalous comets, as this category aligns with our textbooks and level of understanding. But what if reality is far more radical than our limited language and scientific tools allow? Another seemingly minor yet extremely important question is the cultural impact of the very fact of repetition. If an object truly returns every 22,500 years, it inevitably implies that other peoples in different historical eras have already seen it. Perhaps those who built the majestic pyramids, as well as the creators of remarkably accurate astronomical calendars, the ancient civilizations that constructed megalithic monuments perfectly aligned with the stars, all captured the appearance of some object in their myths and legends. What if the so-called solar mythologies, which tell of gods descending from the heavens in fiery chariots, are actually distorted and mythologized memories of encounters with this object? In this context, it becomes not just a visitor, but a kind of marker of time, a harsh reminder that the true history of humanity begins not where we are accustomed to looking for it. The civilizational consequences become even more tangled and unpredictable when we try to anticipate the future. What will happen when humanity, without concealment or ambiguity, officially acknowledges that it is facing interstellar machines? The geopolitical map of the world will change immediately. Scientific priorities will shift radically, and the very concept of technological progress will become relative. Our desperate race for electric vehicles powered by thermonuclear reactors or colonies on Mars may seem like just the initial stage compared to those capable of managing plasma shields and energy cores, the equivalents of black hole collisions. The dilemma lies not only in when such a breakthrough will occur, but also in how to survive the devastating psychological blow of realizing that we are not pioneers of space, but merely students who are very late in absorbing information. All of this makes us ponder. What is truly more dangerous? The official silence of world space agencies or the collective indifference of society, which prefers to stare at the screens of its mobile phones while the sky above is filled with unresolved mysteries? There is something deeply unsettling in the contrast between the scale of the events taking place and the insignificance of our reaction to them. It is as if we have encountered a cosmic signal, and in a panic trying to understand its message, collectively decided to simply ignore it. The greatest concern arises from the realization that we may have long been caught in an ancient network of observations, initiated by the simple fact of transmitting radio signals into space. Each of the objects, Oumuamua, the object of interest, the SWAN, may be part of a single sequence, a kind of cosmic checks or inspections. But if this is the case, what will the next step be in this grand narrative? Will we remain mere observers, or will this cycle require us to take action, cooperate, or even confront? There are no simple answers to these questions yet, and that is why they demand our utmost vigilance, critical thinking, and continuous exploration. In this situation, the absence of choice may turn out to be the worst of all possible solutions. You, who have made it this far, belong to a rare category of people who prefer an unconventional approach. I invite you to contemplate how, in the face of mysteries as ancient as the sun itself, only those who dare to look beyond their limits will be prepared for what is yet to come. The appearance of these celestial objects and their characteristics, the discovery of their cyclical nature, and the visits of these objects undoubtedly open a new layer for religious and theological reflections. Throughout human history, the sky has served as a source of divine revelation, a dwelling place for gods, and a sign, The cyclicality inherent in the movement of celestial bodies resonates with astonishing precision with the eschatological concepts of many world religions, which speak of cycles of time, the end of one world, and the beginning of another. Heavenly signs that herald the arrival of a mission, the day of judgment, or a new era become an integral part of Abrahamic religions, Vedic texts, and the beliefs of indigenous peoples of the Americas. It may turn out that ancient prophets, describing a star from the heavens or a fiery chariot, were actually passing down to their descendants distorted memories of a previous visit from this object that occurred 22,500 years ago. This hypothesis compels us to reconsider the origins of many religious cults. The so-called cargo cults, which arose among isolated tribes upon contact with technologically advanced civilizations, demonstrate how easily the human mind deifies what it cannot understand. The arrival of an object with technologies vastly superior to our own could have served as a catalyst for the emergence of religion in ancient times. Beings controlling such ships would inevitably be perceived as gods, and their technologies as miracles. In this context, myths about gods descending from the heavens to bestow knowledge, agriculture, writing, and laws upon humanity cease to be mere allegories and take on the characteristics of real historical events. Modern world religions also face a serious challenge. On one hand, the existence of intelligent life beyond Earth, especially if it is so ancient and powerful, can be interpreted as confirmation of the boundlessness of divine creation. The universe created by God may be populated by many of His children. On the other hand, this calls into question the anthropocentric model of the world, in which humans are the pinnacle of creation and the sole bearers of the divine image and likeness. How will theologians incorporate the existence of a civilization that has observed our development for tens of thousands of years while remaining unnoticed, much like a scientist observes a colony of microorganisms? Moreover, the behavior of these objects and their synchronized movements toward the sun may be interpreted as some kind of ritual or sacred act of cosmic scale. In many cultures, the sun symbolizes the supreme deity, the source of life and light. Approaching it can be perceived as an act of worship, sacrifice, or receiving energy from a divine source. Such an event could lead to the emergence of new syncretic religions that combine scientific facts with mystical revelations, or it could cause a schism within already existing confessions. Some may see this as a devilish temptation, while others may view it as the second coming. In any case, the boundary between astronomy and theology is becoming alarmingly thin. We stand on the brink of a moment when humanity may need to rethink not only its place in the cosmos, but also the very nature of the divine.